guys, who's your favorite villain, antagonist, or morally grey character? Well, I'm pretty sure 90% of you could think of at least one character you like that fits this description. Characters like that are abundant in media nowadays, and it's no surprise. Everyone loves a character who's a little edgy, a little closed off, who has some emotional baggage, or seems harder to approach than others. These characters often stand out from the main cast, who's usually many good people with their own complexities, who more often than not carry heroic morals and principles, something these specific archetypes may lack or have their own warped version. My name is RGB. If you just connected to the server, welcome. If you're already a regular, welcome home. I have my fair share of favorites who fit one or more of those archetypes. But do you know what's the best part of being an artist? Having the power of tailoring an original character with every single trait I love and make my own ultimate self-indulgent villainoses. So guess what? Today I'm here to make a part 2 of this video where I redesign my comfort OCs. If you haven't watched it yet, I suggest you do in order to understand the setting these characters are in. I've picked 2 OCs from my OC roster and we will be hitting them with the villain and antagonist bean. So let's go! First off, I'll be starting with this girl who initially is called Sage, but we might change it through the course of the video, or maybe if you guys have suggestions for her name, leave it in the comments and I'll pick one. So Sage is the oldest of the bunch and inevitably, she's the one I'm the most attached to. I've had Sage for around 2 years, and she's originally an OC I made to be my main character for the game Our Life Beginnings and Always. This is a bit personal thing of mine that I've drifted off with time, but I've always been a big fan of dating simulator games. I've played so many dating simulators and been obsessing over them for ages. And Our Life is a very special one, which I've played on my birthday, fell in love with it, and finished it in like less than a day. I just played it overnight non-stop because I was so enamored by it. So Sage is supposed to be paired with this guy named Baxter, who is a side love interest. He's very eccentric and he ends things with the game's MC very rudely and abruptly. Sage is set up as this very introverted beach girl character who slowly opens up to him, he becomes her first love, and then she's shut off and never sees him again. She went through many redesigns and in her older forms, she always suffered some form of accident and became dependent on walking aids. It was just something that kept consistent about her character no matter how much I changed her personality or setting she's in. So, how does Sage fit in our fantasy cyberpunkish world? Let's start from the beginning. Sage and Esdras were born as Metropolis children. They were the first fully artificial foreigners ever made, the prototypes of a new breed. Human vessels capable of synchronizing with the metaphysical structure of Metropolis itself and the spiritual realm. Created by the founders, they were never meant to live traditional lives. They were infrastructure given flesh. Everything surrounding their birth is a complete mystery. Their gifts were not random, but by design. Sage's ability to manipulate the physical and Esdras' control over thought, memory, and the spiritual mirrored the 2 core aspects normal humans lacked. The twins were put under many different kinds of activities to test out their strengths and weaknesses, but until they reached the age of 20, nothing was out of the ordinary or extremely abusive to their own health. Sage was the naive twin. She saw the world with whimsical, childish wonder and was enamored by the prospect of living, aging, and dying. She wasn't afraid of suffering or going through hardships, always believing her suffering was righteous. Her body breaking down was worth it if the city lived. She had this martyr complex and was resigned to her fate. Differently from her twin brother, Sage was someone who developed interest in the outside world very quickly. Her abilities as an artificial foreigner were extremely puzzling and facilitated her many escapades from the central they lived in. She was skilled at healing, fixing what's broken, and tampering with others' bodies in a physical state, which meant she could make someone incredibly sick just by touching them. And it was at one of those escapades that she met Eden, our protagonist. They meet during the annual Genesis celebration, where everyone gathered at Metropolis core celebrating innovation, vitality, and evolution. At the Genesis celebration, everyone had to pay respect to the founders of Metropolis, showing their gratitude to the new life that was gifted to them. The celebration also had many different invention competitions, where bright minds would expose their projects and ideas in support of Metropolis in order to be noticed by one of the founders or get sponsors' attentions. Eden was there to help a guy he owed a favor, and his lack of interest quickly turned disastrous once, in very cartoony fashion, he accidentally stumbled into one invention, and that led to the destruction of many others in a row, and he was set to be arrested. But Sage saved his skin, sneaking him through the underground architecture of Metropolis, a labyrinth only builders and founders knew by memory. That's the start of their bond. He was deeply rooted in fascination. Eden saw her as a strange, ethereal, and a little offbeat girl. Meanwhile, Sage saw him as alive, vibrant, and unapologetically human, full of the freedom she dreamed of. Their connection was spontaneous, electric, and defied what each had known their entire lives. He was the realest thing in her life, and she was the only person who always saw through his deflections. The relationship was developed in the cracks between Sage's purpose and Eden's evasions. They met at odd hours, in forgotten alleys and rooftops, talking about things that didn't matter. Eden, ever the avoider, started feeling grounded around her, and Sage felt kind of tainted, beginning to want something for herself. So skipping all of their wholesome interactions and things I can't mention in this video because it would take too long, the relationship started deteriorating when she completed 20 years of age. It was at that time where Eden also started to morph properly and their paths drifted away. Once Sage was considered ripe for consumption, she started being submitted to energy draining. That was Metropolis' core practice that kept the city and its citizens alive, and what so many captured foreigners are submitted to when they're in prison. All of them eventually die because of this. One thing that needs explanation, and I didn't mention in the first video, it's about the city's core, where all of the spiritual energy goes to once it's drained. The core is an underground monolith of machines, tanks, and decaying servers, powered partially by living energy and captured foreigners. It regulates everything in the city: climate bubbles, electricity, life expectancy, and access to memory, as all citizens' personal data and spiritual records are stored and updated by the core. So back to their story, Sage hid her scars at first. Eden knew she was changing, but he didn't want to acknowledge it. He never loved someone before, and he didn't have the tools to process pain that wasn't his own. While she was going through intense pain and change, he started being tracked and hunted, so he really needed to leave. He wanted her to come with him, but she couldn't. And he couldn't understand that she was built to give, and to her, leaving Metropolis would mean abandoning herself. So the thing about energy draining is that it was usually done by the help of other machines. It was highly inefficient, and many people ended up dying, and their spiritual energy wasn't used properly. The twins were created so that would be easy to be done, as Esdras could directly connect himself to the core as a catalyst in order for the energy draining to be more optimal in the long run. It worked for a long time until Sage's body started to violently react to the energy drain. She ended up losing an arm and a leg and her left eye. She claimed that it wasn't a big deal, that it was for the good of Metropolis, but she was slowly dying because of this. And the thing is, Sage couldn't use her abilities on herself, so she was at the mercy of the extreme scarcity of materials that Metropolis experienced. And with Sage's health decline, Esdras refused to function. He stopped eating and drinking, and as expected, started to get sick too. So I know, I said a lot, and I also didn't say much. I feel like there's a lot of information lacking of all these characters, but the video is going to be too long. So we haven't gotten right to the point where Sage can be considered a villain. She's just like this really tragic character in this really bad situation. So let's get to the point. Eden was someone very important to her. They met on their teenage years and they ended up kind of growing together. But the relationship was difficult. Sage was too important to Metropolis, as she was quite literally part of it. And at some point she started dying because of it. Eden couldn't stay, or he would die too, and worst of all, he would watch her die. So, like the coward he usually is, he ran away with Nene, and that was one of the biggest reasons that caused Sage to flip and become our villain for our story. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to love, to want something selfish, and it abandoned her. Kinda reminds me of how in She-Ra, Atra kinda goes insane after Adora leaves her, but I don't really like this ship, but it's kinda of that. They're kinda okay, and then she leaves, and then like, I hate you. It's kinda like that, their dynamic. As time went on, Sage's injuries only piled up and no one came to truly help her. Her conviction ended up growing into resentment, and the twins started to be considered the most expensive experiment of Metropolis. The realization started to dwell, and Sage began to see herself not as a hero, but as a sacrificial lamb in chains, and worse, a tool that everyone expected to endure abuse silent. Her body mutilated, isolated from Eden, and discarded by the city she gave everything for, Sage's empathy began to rot. She started manipulating her healing powers in horrifying ways, keeping others alive against the real, stitching together broken bodies into abominations, or healing her enemies just so they can feel more pain. Now, she had a new goal. No longer does she wish to protect Metropolis. Instead, she wants to remake it. A new city where no one like her will ever be born again, where artificial life is no longer condemned to servitude and slow death. And very crudely, that's our beautiful Sage. I really like her. So I apologize if maybe I spoke too much, but even if I did, as I said before, I'm pretty sure it wasn't enough to portray the depth of her dynamics with Eden and Esdras, and her mental development through the story. Phew. Okay, so now we can get to my boy Esdras. He's a funny one. He's an OC who's a lot less established than Sage. He was always a side character who morphed a little bit to fit whatever role I assigned to him, but he was always set as this really easygoing character who was always deep in his own world and unaware of his surroundings. Originally, both him and Sage had green hair and funky eyebrows, and you guys probably noticed those are two traits I really love shoving into OCs, but with Eden already having these traits, I felt like things would be too repetitive, so I discarded it for the twins. Most about his origins are intertwined with Sage's, so we don't need to go over his birth and purpose again. The thing with Esdras is that he's the cryptid twin. He's completely non-verbal unless with Sage, so she's the only one who has ever heard his voice and knows what he thinks about. And differently from her, his mind was constantly intertwined with Metropolis itself and its systems. Esdras was a being of the abstract. He was inside the emotional subconscious of Metropolis, a medium between humanity and the spiritual data that exists beneath the city's machinery and consciousness. He was connected to the core, so it was like he knew everything about everyone and was constantly overwhelmed most of the time. From childhood, Esdras was in communication with visions, symbols, and ghost-like entities. Many of them dismissed as illusions or side effects of being artificial, but they weren't hallucinations. As he grew up, being around with all the endless data Metropolis stored, Esdras came to understand the concept of the Oracle. To his knowledge, the Oracle was the last remaining fragment of Earth's old spiritual consciousness, deeply connected to foreigners and what kept Earth's fragile existence from breaking. Differently from Sage, he was never that deeply tied to Metropolis people or its survival. As ironic as it may sound, since he has more knowledge and control over the city than Sage herself. As time went by, it was inevitable that Esdras' sanity was always going to be affected at some point by the influx of endless information from both Metropolis and his short meetings with the Oracle's fragments. As his own existence and purpose was constantly under questioning, Esdras could only attach himself to Sage's ambitions and clear view of the world around him, as most of the time he wasn't able to differentiate what was in fact real or what was a bundle of information and memories from others inside Metropolis metadata. Esdras' character section is a lot more straightforward than Sage herself because I won't directly share his intentions and goals here, because if I ever turn this into a story, it will be major spoilers. I know it kind of defeats the point of the video, but hey, it helps with hype, right? It isn't anything extremely groundbreaking though, I think so, but to be clear, Sage is a direct threat to Metropolis itself, while Esdras is the one who goes after our main cast of foreigners. Esdras is the one who gets Sage to assemble a cast of hunters to go after Nene and Eden. He's the one who wants to capture all of the foreigners and find the Oracle, who's his main target. He needs something that all natural foreigners have, and he needs the Oracle for his plan to succeed. I personally really love the design of these two characters. Probably more than the main ones, because I love tragic characters who just suffer for no actual reason, and I like to eventually draw comics for them in the future or make little shorts with audios that reflect their interactions. So keep an eye out for those. And that's our results for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed my little story dump, and I hope I can share more with you all in the future. I've written a bunch for the story, so I hope I eventually have time to make a special content to deep the world and character dynamics. Before we end this video, I like to mention that tomorrow on Sunday, I'll be opening a stream to draw and play with you guys. I don't usually stream, so this is going to be a little experiment to see if you guys enjoyed this extra bit of interaction. If you do, I'll make it something regular and stream every Sunday. Thank you so much for watching up to this point, and I see you in the next video. Bye!